The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants (ZICA) held the 2020 pre-annual general meeting workshop on the 16th October 2020 under the theme Managing Disruption Through Innovation and Adaptation at Forest Park Mall, Livingston. The pre-AGM was attended by over 600 delegates and covered presentations on COVID-19 by Ministry of Health, Managing Disruption Through Innovation and Adaptation by Mr. Vixen Nkube, Chief Executive Officer, Pan-African Federation of Accountants (PAFA), application of International Financial Reporting Standards (IFRS) amidst disruption caused by COVID-19 by Mark Libakeni, partner Ernst & Young, Zambia. The workshop also covered International Public Sector Accounting Standards (IPSAS) updates by Mr. Kelvin Chungu, Managing Partner, NOLAD Zambia, Competition Law and Policy Mr. Chilufya Sampa, by Executive Director, Competition and Consumer Protection Commission and Tax Relief available to organizations as a result of COVID-19, and relief from double taxations by Mr. Moses Shuko, Commissioner Domestic Taxes, Zambia Revenue Authority, ZRA.
Zambia, proud and free, land of work and joy in unity.
Victors in the struggle for the right, we've won freedom's fight. Oh, one, strong and free, Africa is our motherland, fashioned with a grace God's own good hand. Let us show our people, join as one, brothers under the sun. Oh, one, strong and free, one land and one nation is our cry. Dignity and peace neath Zambia's sky, like an noble eagle in its flight. Zambia, praise to thee. Oh, one, strong and free, praise be to God. Bless sacred nation, free men we stand under the flag of our land. Zambia, praise to thee. Oh, one, strong and free.
Please remain standing as we open in a prayer.
Shall we bow our heads and pray? Our dear Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for today. Lord, we thank you that we're able to gather here despite the difficult circumstances that we've been passing through. Lord, we ask that as we start our meeting and deliberating on various issues, that you should start with us and end with us. And as we go back to our various destinations, protect us with your angelic protection. We pray to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the workshop. My name is Moses Kondwan Chitoshi. I'll be your host for today. It's good to see you all. And I hope that you had a good night's rest from the long journeys from your various workstations. Before we get started, I'd just like to take you through a few housekeeping measures for your own safety. To begin with, just to indicate that you need to ensure that you observe social distancing and adhere to the measures that have been communicated to you and that have been put in place to ensure that your safety is guaranteed. Ensure that you wear your mask at all times and avoid crowding. Also ensure that you sit in your correct place. And as I indicated earlier, you need to fill out the contact tracing form that was circulated to you, and it will be collected from your seat. Just to also indicate that we do have conveniences that are situated just behind this marquee for the VIP delegates, and also just next to the registration center at the very end of the building, we have provided for conveniences in that area. I wish to also recognize the president, the presence of the Zika president, Mr. Jason Kazilimani, and also to recognize past presidents present here today, all council members here present. I would also like to recognize the presence of past council members here present, all the speakers that have come to share with us the various topics and discussions, and also to recognize the presence of the Zika CEO, Mr. Bona Kashinga. Just to also announce that lunch will be provided from Avani, Chrisma Hotel, and Zambezi Junction. I would also like to just not forget our participants who are also joining us through Zoom. Welcome to the workshop. And then also to indicate that there will be availability of transport from here to the respective areas where lunch will be provided. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to now invite the CEO, Secretary and Chief Executive, Mr. Bona Kashinga, to come and give us his opening remarks. Mr. Kashinga.
Good morning once again. We wish to welcome you to this pre-AGM conference for 2020. To also give thanks that we all traveled safely and are able to have this long. I wish to ride on some of the protocols that have been given. I recognize the presence of the Zika president, Mr. Jason Kazilimani Jr., former Zika presidents who are present with us, the Zika vice president, and other council members, other former Zika council members present, the Pan-African Federation of Accountants Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Vixon Nube, Commissioner Domestic Taxes, Mr. Moses Shuko, and the ZRA delegation, which includes Madam Bridget Yenga, senior members, and all members that are present, distinguished invited guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I would like to welcome you all to the 2020 pre-AGM workshop. It is indeed a great relief and a pleasure to finally be able to host this annual event. Allow me to thank all the workshop participants for joining us today virtually and those that are present here as we dissect the theme, Managing Disruption Through Innovation and Adaptation. Distinguished guests, I would like to take this opportunity to remind the members of the importance of the pre-AGM workshop and other CPD activities that the Institute facilitates. These kind of programs enable the members to remain updated with the latest business and professional knowledge, which enable members to maintain skills at the cutting edge required to ensure that clients or employers receive competent professional services. This workshop will provide a platform for members to consider adopting new ideas to work more efficiently and effectively in a changing business and work landscape, which is confronted with disruption and in which effective adaptation is key to survival. Indeed, the Institute itself has had to adapt to the current new normal. As you can see, we are in a setup that is not our usual hosting venue. This is all in the theme of adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the resource persons, Mr. Vixon Nyube, PAFA CEO, Mr. Mark Libakeni, partner E&Y, Zambia, Mr. Chilufya Sampa, CEO for the CCPC, Mr. Kelvin Chungu, managing partner Lowland Zambia, Mr. Moses Shuko, Commissioner Domestic Taxes, Zambia Revenue Authority. We would like to appreciate the continued support of the expert presenters and the commitment they show to the Institute without commensurate compensation, something that all of us should be able to emulate. We can only develop our profession to greater recognition as we work together. May I also extend a special thanks to all our platinum and gold sponsors for the pre-AGM workshop, including the Zambia Revenue Authority, Professional Insurance Corporation Zambia, Prudential Life Assurance Zambia, Zambia National Building Society, and Ahava Consulting Limited, and all companies that are exhibiting at the workshop today. As I conclude, allow me to invite the President of the Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, Mr. Jason Kazilimani Jr., to officially open the pre-AGM workshop. Please help me make welcome Mr. Kazilimani Jr. to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, excuse my dress. I'm not in a suit today because I've been told these days men are not allowed to wear suits when they leave home. Former Zika presidents present. The Zika Vice President, Mrs. Cecilia Zimba, and other Zika Council members. Former Zika Council members present. The Pan-African Federation of Accountants CEO, Mr. Vixon Nyube, who some of you may not be aware, but is actually a former Zika CEO. When I was first on council several years ago, he was a CEO at that time. The Commissioner for Domestic Taxes, Mr. Moses Shuko from Zambia Revenue Authority. Senior members and all members, distinguished invited guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good morning, everyone. It's indeed my singular honor and privilege to be here to officially open the pre-AGM workshop under the theme, Managing Disruption Through Innovation and Adaptation. Let me first and foremost express happiness that we are able to finally hold this event under the new normal. We've had the event postponed twice because of the COVID pandemic, but we're really glad that we finally got permission to hold this event. I would like to thank the members, management, and Zika staff for their tireless efforts to ensure that the pre-AGM and AGM does take place. I would like to thank the various sponsors and exhibitors for co-sponsoring and supporting this event. Ladies and gentlemen, this pre-AGM workshop takes place in an extraordinary time, and the theme, Managing Disruption Through Innovation and Adaptation, is a befitting one. In the current environment, accounting professionals are all searching for ways to weather the storm. While it is still too early to predict the future path of the pandemic, one thing is certain. It will be the most innovative firms and economies that will have the best chance to emerge stronger out of this crisis. I think it is Warren Buffett that said, it's when the tide goes out that you see who's been swimming naked. So I think COVID actually will expose entities and organizations that did have underlying issues. And I think COVID is basically just exposing what those issues were. We should acknowledge as accounting professionals that innovation is not a means to an end in itself. It is a continuous long-term endeavor. As accounting professionals existing in this highly globalized economy, innovation and adaptation has become the key driver for growth and competitiveness in developing and advanced economies. The capability to innovate will be increasingly a crucial determinant of the global competitiveness of nations over the coming decades. The rapid pace of technological change continues to disrupt traditional procedures in all spheres, including the accounting profession. Both the accounting and auditing functions are experiencing a major wave of automation that most likely will result in a substantive and significant reduction of staff. It is predicted that the traditional mix of jobs in accounting firms will change substantially, and accountants will need to learn new skills when the more traditional tasks become automated and the analytic needs of the work increase substantively. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have COVID-19 impacting differently on organizations and individuals. And as such, the demand for robust financial leadership, innovation, and adaptability cannot be overemphasized. Therefore, in today's business environment, the role of the accountant has become more strenuous, evolving, and highly susceptible to external and internal scrutiny. As accounting professionals, we need to embrace agility. The world is no longer the same as it was 2 months ago, or even 3 months ago, even a year ago. The landscape has changed and will continue to change rapidly, which means accountants need to adapt to new realities very, very quickly. Given that there are still so many unknowns surrounding COVID-19 and its ultimate impact, we need to be able to adjust quickly as circumstances warrant. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to preempt the discussions of the day. I hope that the presentations today will make a substantial contribution to the best practical ways and means of adapting and innovating for us as accountancy professionals. Indeed, all Zika members need to be ambassadors and pioneers of an innovative mindset and should be able to be quick to adapt to change. Once again, my appreciation goes to the organizers, speakers, moderators, and sponsors for their commitment to the successful holding of the 2020 pre-AGM workshop and for allowing me to deliver these few brief remarks. I wish you all fruitful deliberations in not only assimilating information needed to enhance our professional ethos, but to also contribute and participate fully in today's discussions. And my final plea is please let us keep safe. The last thing that we want is for Zika members to be accused of either bringing COVID into Livingstone or taking COVID out of Livingstone back to where they're coming from. So please, let's keep safe, social distance, mask up, and so on and so forth. And I think the Minister of Health will be giving a talk shortly. So please, let's give them their undivided attention. It is now my pleasure and I think I'm saying this for the last time as Zika president, it is now my great pleasure to declare the 2020 pre-AGM workshop officially open. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that enlightening speech. Before we get into the morning session of our workshop, I'd just like to make one announcement. We do have a designated car park for all the delegates. So we have those individuals that have parked in the main road. We are kindly asking if you could move your vehicles from the main road into the designated car park. We did emphasize this point, and we did communicate to all of you that we do have a designated car park. So please, those that have parked in the main road, kindly ensure that you move your vehicles. Thank you. Moving on to the morning session. But before we do, let's just have a quick word from our sponsors.
Control of your tax Take control of your tax planning. Avoid penalties and interest. Returns and payments due by the 10th of the month for declarations of the previous month's transactions are pay as you earn and skills development levy. Returns and payments due by the 14th of the month are turnover tax, withholding tax, mineral royalty tax, tourism levy, gaming and baiting, presumptive tax. Returns and payments for all withholding VAT agents is the 16th of the month. Returns and payments for all VAT registered suppliers is the 18th of the month. Submit the returns and make payments on or before the respective due dates to avoid penalties on the late submission of returns and payments of taxes. Further, note that VAT tax invoices for all business to business and business to government transactions must bear the TPIN of the buyer without fail. Zambia Revenue Authority. My tax, your tax, our destiny. Take control of your tax planning. Avoid penalties and interest. Returns and payments due by the 10th of the month for declarations of the previous month's transactions are pay as you earn and skills development levy. Returns and
Hi, my name is Anthony Strake. I'm a director of Vix's Farming here in Chisamba. Farming involves a number of risks. From an insurance perspective, this can involve...
We do acknowledge that we have a couple of adverts, but we will play them periodically. Moving on to our first session, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the moderator for the morning session, Mr. Julius Ziambo. Sir.
I am the Group Executive Chairman for BGS Group of Companies. I am also a Zika Council member and chair of the Taxation Committee. You know, at times when you're in these offices, you take it that all the people in the house know you. So I had to introduce myself for the sake of that. This morning, I'm going to moderate on three topics. And the first one has to do with the COVID pandemic that we are in, that we are experiencing as a country and the world. And to help us understand this further and to guide us on the do's and the don'ts during the time we're going to be attending the pre-AGM workshop and indeed the AGM. In short, during our stay in Livingstone, we have Mr. Kalimbwe Derek, who is a clinical care officer from the Livingstone District Health Office. Mr. Kalimbwe, sir. A big hand for Mr. Kalimbwe as he comes to talk to us on the COVID-2019.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, just like you have heard, my name is Derek Karimbwe from Livingston office. My boss was supposed to be here, the district health director. Unfortunately, he's out of town. He has traveled. So I've been given this responsibility to come and talk to everyone here, just to remind ourselves on the COVID pandemic. So during my presentation, we are going to do, it's a short presentation. We are going to remind ourselves on the exchange. So I'm going to go through the short presentation. We are going to remind ourselves on what coronavirus is. I know we are aware about what it is, but it's very important that we go through what we already know, so that from time to time we need to go through some of these lessons which we already know, some of us. So what is corona? How is it transmitted? How is it prevented? Then the most important thing is the issue of us, the accounting officers. How are we going to prevent ourselves from contracting the coronavirus? So that is one of the things which we are going to talk about. Then I'll end my presentation also. Since you are in Livingston, some of you might come across our health workers. I'll talk about some of the things we are doing, so that if our health workers will come and ask you some questions, or maybe they will make a follow-up, you shouldn't be surprised, because we need to know what we are doing here in Livingston as a health department. So to start with, we are very much aware that Zambia now has recorded more than 15,000 cases of coronavirus. To be specific, it's about 15,616 as of yesterday. So if you look at that problem, it's a big problem which is there. From the beginning, people thought maybe it's just one of those things. But now we have managed to see what is happening as of now. So what is coronavirus? We know for sure that coronavirus is a respiratory disease caused by a new coronavirus 2019. The virus causes respiratory illness similar to common cold, and in severe cases, it may lead to pneumonia, kidney failure, and can result into death. So the virus was first identified in China. That one we are very much aware. But we need to know for sure that now we are no longer talking about China. Even here in Livingston, we have some cases of coronavirus. Common signs and symptoms of coronavirus. These include fever. By fever, I mean that is body hotness. When the body is hot, the temperature of more than 37.5 degrees. Because, you know, in our language, some people, when we say fever, they may start talking of sneezing itself to say it's a fever. So, apart from fever, there's chest pain, there's cough, difficult breathing, headache, shortness breath, and also someone might end up having some sore throats. Those are some of the common symptoms of coronavirus. Who is at risk of contracting the disease? Everyone. We are told that everyone is at risk of contracting this virus. However, others are more at risk, particularly the people I'm going to mention here, the categories of people I'm going to mention here. Anybody close contact with infected person, someone who has who has been in contact with infected person, that one is at more risk. Also, even us health workers, remember us health workers, we are looking after the sick. So from time to time, if at all I'm attending to someone who is having coronavirus, I might end up contracting the virus. Travelers to areas affected with the disease, I'm talking about you. Don't be scared. I'm talking about people who are traveling all over. Those who are traveling to places which are affected by the virus, they are at risk of contracting the disease. Airline workers and those working at border posts also are at risk, including the chronically ill persons. Chronically ill persons, I'm talking about the non-communicable diseases, those who have got non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, those are at risk, including those who have got cancers. Then also, including the children. So those they are at risk of contracting the disease. Prevention measures. On prevention measures, we just want to go through some of the things we already know. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water, or use any alcohol-based hand sanitizer, which I've already seen in this place. So let us make sure that we wash our hands. We have got some buckets there of water. So from time to time, you need to wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who have symptoms of coronavirus. As we are seated here now, if you see that someone is coughing, someone is sneezing, someone visibly, you see that this person is not feeling well. There's need to communicate, and there's need possibly to report that to the health workers so that we avoid contact with other people who are healthy. Also, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. When coughing or sneezing, cover mouth and nose with flexed elbow or tissue. So we advise to cough in a tissue or in a flexed elbow. And cook all your meat and meat products thoroughly before eating. Also, the last one is, which is not appearing there, is the most important one, is the mask. We need to wear our mask from time to time so that we prevent ourselves from getting the infection. Workplace safety measures. On workplace safety measures, employers are advised to follow some simple steps to help protect the health and safety of staff. Not only staff, but even the clients who are visiting your offices, they need to be protected. Best practice workplace measures, which you may put in place in our working places, will include, if someone becomes unwell in the workplace with a new continuous cough or a high temperature, they should be sent home and advised to follow the advice whilst they are at home. So, meaning that those who are not feeling well, you can tell them to go and stay at home until when they recover. Also, employees should be reminded to wash their hands for 20 seconds more frequently and catch coughs and sneezes in tissues. So we must have some tissue where you can, when you cough, you use the tissue, just like I mentioned earlier on. The other thing which we are talking about here is that there's need to frequently clean and disinfect objects and surfaces that are touched regularly using your standard cleaning products. So at your workplace, there are places which are touched by your clients frequently. Those you need to disinfect them. I'm talking to accounting staff. You find that people are using money, and some of them, when counting the money, they'll put saliva on the money first so that they count nicely. I'm not talking about the accounting staff, but I'm talking about the clients, as they count their money, they will use some saliva so that they count it properly. So make sure that you put some disinfecting measures in place where you are working from. Also, employees from defined vulnerable groups should be strongly advised and supported to stay at home and work from there if possible. That is, those which you think maybe they are not okay, they are what, you can give them light duties so that they work from home. Okay, workplace safety measures continue. Other protective measures may include redesigning processes to allow social distancing in place. We have seen some marks being set in some places where people are stepping. They have labeled to say, stand 2 meters apart. So that is very much encouraged. Others have put some barriers so that there's no closer contact. Use technology as teleconferencing instead of face-to-face meetings. Like we are talking about here, already I heard that some people are following this meeting through the Zoom, meaning that if we were to allow everyone to come here, this entire area was going to be full. So others are following through Zoom, which is very good. So lastly, I would like to inform you that as you move through, as you stay here in Livingstone, we have put some measures in place of sensitizing people in the community. And what I'm doing here is part of the sensitization. Also screening travelers at entry points. So even here, from time to time, you see the health workers coming to your seat there, taking the temperature on a daily basis. Also isolation of confirmed symptomatic cases at Central Hospital. We are privileged here. We have got an isolation facility at Central Hospital. Those who may not be feeling well, we may end up taking them to that place if they are confirmed to be COVID cases. Contact tracing, they are going to do that. I've seen some forms which are being filled in. Also, inspection of public places for insurance of permits, monitoring of compliance in schools, shops, churches, and markets, including here where we are seated, the health workers, our team, from time to time, they will move around to see, to eat that everyone is complying with the COVID-19 prevention measures. Then also routine surveillance testing for suspects. Those who may be suspects, they may end up being tested. So those are some of the things which we are doing in Livingstone. Thank you very much.
So let us not take it for granted, colleagues. A lot of people have died from this COVID pandemic. May we not be counted among the many. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalimbwe Delik, for that precise presentation. And as we are around here, please, the only person who is exempted from wearing a mask is the person speaking from the podium. All of us in the auditorium, may we please wear our masks. All of us. Wearing a mask is not having it on your chin here. We have to cover our mouth and our nose at the same time. This is very critical. We don't want to lose any of us in here. So may we ensure that social distancing does not replace wearing of masks. These complement each other. Thank you so much. We are now going to move to the next speaker, who is actually our keynote speaker for the pre-AGM workshop. He has already been introduced to us, and he is talking to us actually on the theme of the pre-AGM workshop itself, which is managing disruption through innovation and adaptation. When I was informed that I was going to moderate this session, I took time to understand what really disruption is. And you agree with me that one of the trendiest terms in the business world today is disruption. And when I, out of interest, in trying to acquaint myself further, visited the dictionary to look at the meaning or definition of disruption, this is what I came across. Disruption is a disturbance or problem that interrupts an event, activity, or process. And then one event came to my mind, which was disrupted. I think it happened about a week or so on a Sunday at some church. There was an event which was disrupted. And you then agree with me that as I was talking to the speaker this morning and I was asking him what he was going to focus on in his presentation to us, I tried to ask if it was going to be around COVID, and he said, no, COVID is just one of the disruption. I'm going to talk about disruption and not COVID. So colleagues, all of us here and any of us here can be a disruptor. So to talk to us on this important topic, I will invite our keynote speaker, the man we have grown up to know, the man we have grown up to respect in the accounting fraternity, Mr. Vixon Nyue. A big hand for Mr. Nyue, ladies and gentlemen.
I am painfully aware that we live in COVID times, and with a lot of things have to change. The moderator has just whispered to me that my speaking time is 25 minutes. Synchronize your watches. It means that I should not be standing here beyond 9:35. I think I've already discounted. Now, when Jason was giving introductory remarks, he mentioned my role as Zika CEO sometime in the past. I don't know whether he still remembers the conversation. Then head a committee. So I say to him, now the mic is going down. I don't know who I should charge this time to myself or the organizers, but someone's got to pay for the time. Thank you very much. I say to him, as time goes by, why don't you consider running for Zika president? That was a long time ago. Bear in mind that I was last CEO of Zika in 2006. Now that conversation had taken place much earlier than that. And I must say, I'm happy that that conversation came to fruition. And Bonnie, my friend, let me thank your team, of course, with your counsel, Mr. President, and Vice President Cecilia, and all of you people for inviting me here. Because this is an outstanding moment for me. In 2011, I was appointed to become PAFA CEO effective 1st January 2012. My very first official announcement after that my first official assignment after that appointment was to come to the Zika annual business conference to give a talk to the Zika members. My very first official engagement as PAFA CEO was to come to Zika. In December 2020,
I'm handing over the PAFA chief executiveship to another person. And my last assignment, official assignment as PAFA CEO, is to stand in front of the Zika members and talk to them. To me, that is a great, significant moment. It reminds me of what the Tongas would say in their language. Mwana ha ohidaguji halilo. A child of a Daika will always go back home to die. Every time a Daika is in problem, the last place it will be facing is to try to go to its place of birth. That is what I have come to be. Now, Mr. Moderator, I did also decide to find ways of contextualizing my discussion about disruption by going to a dictionary to try and find out what disruption is. Now, I've just noted that this stage is very fragile. So if I become the vixen who I'm used to be, I may end up sinking down, so I better come down a bit. So disruption has been defined by one of the dictionaries that the action of preventing something, especially a system, process, or event from continuing as usual or as expected. It goes on to say, for business purposes, it's the action of completely changing the traditional way of an industry or the way a market operates by using new methods and technologies. Simply put, ladies and gentlemen, what is not. What was is no longer. That is a disruption. Ladies and gentlemen, trying to manage the past is of no use in the modern days. In fact, trying to use the past to manage the future has little value. Adopting innovative manners, innovative ways to manage the future is the thing that will make a difference going forward. In the words of the IFAC CEO, the accountant's profession must stop doing things differently and start doing different things. That is what innovation and adaptation will take us. If there was one key driver that brought us to start considering issues of disruption, it was the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know how many of you know that a gentleman called Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, was the first person attributed to having come up with the term, the fourth industrial revolution. This is what he had to say as he continued to consider issues affecting the world. The new technology age is shaped in a responsive and responsible way, could catalyze a new cultural renaissance to enable us feel part of a larger whole, greater than ourselves, a true global civilization. He goes on to say, the fourth industrial revolution has the potential of robotizing humanity and thus compromising our traditional way of meaning, our work, community, family, and identity. Or we can use the fourth industrial revolution to lift humanity to a new collective and moral consciousness based on a shared destiny. He appeals to all of us. It is incumbent on all of us to make sure that the latter happens and not the former. We must look at this disruption and see how we harness it in such a way that it changes the whole society for the better. I was going to say areas of the human endeavor for those of you who are old enough to understand that term. The eradication of hunger, poverty, disease, ignorance, crime, and above all, exploitation of men by men. I am sure those with a few gray hair like me know where those statements come from. So, when faced with the disruption, what is it then that we should then do as a people? And what can we do even as an accountant's profession? Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to propose that the first point of call is a change of mindset. We can never be able to deal with the disruptions, to adapt as well as innovate using our old mindset. In a book entitled Change by Design, Tim Brown has said, we must create a culture that believes in it is better to ask for forgiveness afterwards than wait for permission before. We must have a culture that not only rewards success, but gives permission to fail. Because, ladies and gentlemen, in this new area that we are in, this new reality, you cannot be able to follow all the processes and procedures and still be able to stay up to date. Even the issue of COVID, when it came, those countries that tried to first analyze and find, extrapolate and do this, by the time they realized that this thing is serious, a lot of their people were dead. But those that took a decision immediately and started putting measures in place. Now, one of those countries in South Africa, believe it or not, in South Africa, there was a sense of panic when COVID struck. I tell you, you could reverse your car on the road in those Johannesburg roads. You could not see a single car driving during the time when the government says no more moving up and down. People just retreated. And given the amount of traffic that comes in Johannesburg from all over the world, the fact that the numbers of deaths are what they are can only be attributable to the religious as a miracle. But to the well-schooled, that was an aggressive and positive action that the government took. Now, by the way, while I'm still talking about disruption and innovation, yeah, I know in Zambia, we are very quick to talk about miracles, God's grace. Can I just tell you that God's grace works better if you put it with action from humanity. If you always kneel down to pray and do nothing about it, the results will be disastrous. If a farmer sees locusts in his maize or in his crops and starts to spray them as he's praying, he will get a better result than the one who is kneeling down in his room and doing nothing about the locust. New subjects, ladies and gentlemen, are coming on the market to equip us with the coming world. Subjects like design thinking, integrative thinking. And my brother Bona, as you look at the curriculum of the profession, if not the actual qualification, but as you look at the continued professional development, may I suggest that you start going through the books that do with design thinking and integrative thinking. Because, ladies and gentlemen, all our training that taught us that when we look at the past and then extrapolate into the future, we'll be able to come up with results, now no longer hold true, because what you knew in the past has nothing to do what is going to happen tomorrow. So, one of the greatest impediments to innovation is the issue of experience. The more experienced that we are, sometimes we become a stumbling block to innovation. One time I walked into a hotel in Harare. They gave me our electronic keys, and I got a key, and I got to the room. I tried to open. The key was not working. Tried again. It wasn't working. So I went back to reception and I said, my lady, this key is not working. She says, no, sir, you should not have put it near your phone. She didn't even ask me if I did. So I told her, no, my lady, I have not even put the key near my phone. I've been holding it in my hand. This key is not working. After a long conversation, she went to get an engineer or a technician who got the key and found out that actually the whole unit in the room has deprogrammed. No matter, even the master key that they had in the hotel could not open it. That thing was just messed up. But because she was so experienced in knowing that when a key is not working, it is because it has been near a phone. She could not think. And sometimes us experienced people become stumbling blocks to innovation because we are trying to use what we knew in the past to solve a problem of today, and that is total rubbish. So when we write in our adverts that 10 years experience, 5 years experience, 20 years experience, may I suggest that rather seek to find out if your candidate has the ability to think in the present moment, not in what used to be. So to Zika, before I get to Zika now, I'm going to talk about Zika. Let me say something that is very close to my heart. May I recommend to all of you listening to me today that our Zika-ness must rise above anything else. Now, let me give you a good example. When we came here, we all came differently. Some drove, and even in driving, others were driving Porsche cars, others drove average cars. We drove differently. Others came by bus, others flew here. But we're all coming to the AGM, to this meeting. Now, if you, while you are sitting here, you have your mind set in your car, you are being a waste of time to all of us. Now, what am I trying to say? We qualified some of us differently. Some of us did ACCA, some CIMA, some CPA, some whatever you did. But your Zika-ness must rise above that vehicle that brought you into Zika, and you become Zika wholeheartedly. I have been interacting with some young people on Facebook, by the way, over things. And whenever I hear someone mention a foreign qualification, I have not hesitated to get back to them and say, stop your neo-colonialist mind. You are a Zambian working for Zika. Deal with Zika. And some of us old folks also have this habit of thinking we are still ACCA, Zika, it's ACCA, CIMA, ICAW, whoever you are. We are all Zika. When we come here, we are in the graveyard. There is no grave for the rich and for the people. We are all lying still in the grave. And no one, no matter how much money you had when you were alive, can do anything about it. That is what Zika is, all of us. It's a leveler. Now, having said that, let me come back to it. Zika must then start to re-engineer and reinvent the accountant's profession. We need to create systems leadership and not the old leaderships that we knew. That means, ladies and gentlemen, we must be technological leaders. We must be leaders in technology. So Zika and all of us must invest heavily in technology. What do I mean? If I wanted to find out where to buy chikanda today, I should be able to Google, and it must be able to tell me that if you go to this place, you'll find chikanda. Ladies and gentlemen, COVID has made us become very clever on issues of online trading, but unfortunately for Africa, that trade means buying from China, England, America, or wherever. But I've never seen a single product in my Google which has sent me to come and look for something in Zambia. Even when I'm looking for kabulankete from South Africa, I don't know where to find it. That means that we are not yet understanding what we should do as leaders in matters of information technology and the disruption that we are following. Let us gather people in our society and create for them apps where we can Google them and find where to find. If I want a fat cow, it must be able to tell you that go to Bonda Teka Laluka, you'll find one there. Not every time I go, it starts telling me some some other people's farms. Even in South Africa, it's hard to find any business. If you say plumber, you can hardly find anything owned by a black person. Why? Because we have not believed in adapting the leadership in technology. Just because you are able to buy things from China does not mean you are now technologically advanced. You must be able to utilize it for the benefit of the country that we are in and for our own people. I have talked to some of us, and I say, are you on LinkedIn or are you on Facebook? No, me, I don't do social media. What do you do? Who is going to write you a letter and post it? Who is going to give you a telephone call? I'm in a meeting, I'm able to send Jason a WhatsApp. Jason, I'm running late in this meeting, so please give me another 5 minutes. How can I do that if you say you are not on social media? And you think you are very intelligent? No, what how are you going to deal with innovation if you are still hoping that people write you a letter? So we need to develop technological leadership, invest heavily, mentally, emotionally, and financially in technology. All of us. And Zika must take a lead for the accountant's profession. By the way, do you know that if you're on LinkedIn, you can pay money to enhance your the search engine for yourself? Once someone says CEO, the first name that will come is yours. If you pay LinkedIn, you say CEO, you will find some names come immediately. Those people have paid. They have enhanced their accessibility on social media. While you say, no, me, I'm not there. Others are paying to be there. Yeah. Then we also need to be leaders in governance. In the world of fourth industrial, leaders in governance. What does that mean? We must set standards and rules of the game. By the way, do you know that criminals, people with criminal minds, are very quick to adopt technology and use it to their benefit? While you, the people who are supposed to be ethical, you are still saying, no, this is not for me. Criminals have gone, just the other day on my Airtel line, I got that I had just been, someone deposited money and they've given me an identity on how to get the money, but I know all that rubbish. I mean, I don't expect to get money deposited in my account if I don't know, if I'm not expecting it. And I don't expect any normal person to forget and deposit accidentally 10,000 in my account. Of course I don't. If they did, they'll be calling Airtel the whole day and night to find out where their money has gone. So how do I then wake up and say I'm going to claim that money? But that's what criminal minds do. They quickly latch on technology and want to use it, while you, the ethical, keep saying, Then we must go on to the third pillar. So there are 3 pillars on systems leadership: technology leadership, governance leadership, and then value leadership. We must make sure that we lead technology towards being human-centered, better the lot of society. And that's where the areas of human endeavor that our former president, Kenneth Kaunda, used to preach about. Now that I'm reading these books on how to better utilize the fourth industrial revolution, now I understand how that man was a visionary. And indeed, one time when he's given a talk at a place where I was attending, many years after he left the presidency, he says, if I have seen further than other men, it is because I stood on the shoulder of giants. So he said, the areas of human endeavor as the eradication of hunger, poverty, disease, ignorance, crime, and above all, exploitation of man by man. In managing disruption and innovation, disruption through innovation and adaptation, we must make sure that our efforts are leading towards the betterment of society. Now, I get worried. One time I was talking to a group of young people in South Africa, and everyone kept talking about how they hope to do something to make money. And I said, I think you have it wrong. What you should be thinking about, how to make society a better place. But should it make you money, that would be an added incentive. But all of us have been so tuned to making money, we've forgotten that we are human beings. It is not the technology will make this society better, but it should not be a thing that makes others too rich. You know, Obama answers, he says, I don't have so much money like other people, but I'm supposed to live. I live very comfortably. I wonder why these guys want to have billions in their bank account. Now, I will not talk about the issues of corruption because we are heading for elections. I'll keep quiet. So, all I can appeal to all of us then, let us embrace the 3 pillars, the leadership pillars of the 4th industrial revolution. Let us become leaders in technology, in governance, and in values. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all.
I feel very strongly in my spirit to request Mr. Nyuwe to administer an oath of allegiance to Zika on all of us here. If it was my church, I would have said, Mr. Nyuwe, please, can you come and administer this oath of allegiance? Because indeed, above anything else, we are Zika. And nothing else must come first to Zika. And this is one thing that has guided my participation in the activities of the Zika Council. Always Zika must be a priority. Mr. Nyuwe, no words can express how profoundly excited I am to listen to what you have just delivered to this auditorium. Zika members, I know that as we are listening attentively so to Mr. Nyuwe's presentation, many of us had our organizations in mind. But I want to believe this matter goes deep in our individual blood veins. If we cannot innovate and adapt at an individual level, truly, we are destined for destruction. We are destined for destruction. Without taking much of the time, and I know there are burning issues coming from the members, we will be inviting Mr. Nyuwe later on to come and respond to your questions. But may we go straight into the next presentation, which is on the application of the International Financial Reporting Standards amid this disruption caused by COVID-19. And to present this paper, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Mr. Mark Livakeni, who is a partner at EY Zambia. Mr. Livakeni, please.
It's nice to be in a live workshop. Since March, all of us have just known Zoom. No live events, you're just alone in your room, a camera facing you, so this is a bit of a change, seeing everybody live here. So if you see that I shout those words that we normally use over Zoom meetings, team meetings, like mute, unmute. Please forgive me. I think we also used some entertainment now. I recollect being on a Zoom call, and the child walks in and says, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in a meeting with the boss." Then, "Daddy, who's this?" I'm pointing to the screen. I said, "That's the boss." Then the child goes, shouts the sister's name. "Ha, ha, ha, ha. Daddy's boss is a picture." Okay, so I'm going to talk about COVID-19, not from a medical point of view, not from a social point of view, but at its lowest level from a bookkeeping point of view. And that sounds a little bit boring. Yeah. Okay, so my agenda really, I've got 13 items, but you can throw them into 3 groupings. I'm going to have a bit of context, look at the impacts of COVID-19 on financial reporting, and then lastly, I'll leave you with some talking points. Next slide, please. Okay, so what has COVID had in terms of the industry, in terms of the disruption? Those are a few headlines that you'll have seen in the press. Africa and China, twin supply demand shocks. Fitch talking about the outlook on African economies, looking gloom. We saw hotels, Pamosi Hotel, talking about closing. We talked about the mines as well. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty continues because, as we've seen, sometimes we think COVID is gone, but it then rears its ugly face. And that's quite evident, for example, now in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay. We saw also shortage of supplies. Global supply chains were terribly affected. We anticipated that there would be reduced FDI coming into our countries, and generally reduced economic growth. I think it's me who's now a problem with this thing. Oh, okay. If we look at the impacts, and the slide talks about the impacts across industries. We had severe impacts on tourism. I think if you think about Livingstone here, there was low tourism, international flights were cancelled, planes were parked, so there was a tremendous impact on tourism. Construction couldn't get supplies, so there was reductions there. Manufacturing was affected, again, because of global supply problems. Banking, we've seen, some of you have looked at the latest banking results, you've seen a growth in ECLs or bad debts, NPLs, non-performing loan numbers. All those speaking to the impact of COVID. However, I must say, not all gloom, because the telecom and technology industry actually benefited from COVID. Yeah. So you were buying more bundles than you usually buy because you needed them on a Zoom meeting. You were talking more on the phone than you usually do because, well, you had to talk on the phone or over a Teams meeting, over a Zoom meeting. So we saw technology actually seeing an upside benefit from COVID. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So the impact of COVID or the crisis varies across our different sectors, like I've illustrated. And then you tend to find, so on that continuum there, you're seeing tourism and hospitality were the most affected, and the least affected was technology and communication. Okay? And you note that the areas that were most affected are those where social distancing is a critical part of the industry. Okay, so if we talk about tourism, we talk about bars, we talk about restaurants, those when they closed, because of the interactions that are necessary, they were hardest hit. Okay, and in fact, you've seen that they're the last industries to be freed in terms of coming back to the new normal. I want also to say that the longer the crisis continues, you tend to see that all industries get affected. And that's because of the ecosystem that's there. So you have these interrelationships that affect each industry. Next slide, please. So in terms of financial reporting, what is the impact then? In a lot of my discussions, people have talked about COVID being, for those of us in the old school, I think, what was the term? Extraordinary event? Yes? No? We're all new school. An extraordinary event, and that was an event that was never forecast, you could never think it would happen, and you'd isolate it in your financials, treat it differently from everything else, you know. Obviously, over the years, that fell away. And so a lot of people have thought that that was not going to happen with financial reporting and COVID. That, in fact, you treat it as an extraordinary event, isolate it, and report it separately. Okay? Now, in terms of financial reporting and the close process, COVID has basically 3 areas of impact. Right? Firstly, it's around the fact that workers, me and you, are now having to work remotely, and what that means. Secondly, around abrupt microeconomic environmental changes. So today, the rate is 5 kwacha. Tomorrow, the rate is 35 kwacha. How do you just deal with it in your books? Lastly, but not the least, regulators are also revising the regulatory guidelines and requirements. So the regulators are also worried about, is the economy heating up, is the industry heating up, is capital being eroded, is the society, public interest being affected. So regulators are also looking at those changes. So from a financial reporting point and with remote working, you're now thinking about your capacity constraints. So you cannot be in the same room. You have to be away. So how do you meet your deadlines? How do you report? Your suppliers may not be available. Okay, so availability of third-party data is reduced or delayed. That affects your financial reporting. Yeah. You've reduced timelines for review because of the incapacity. You don't have everybody around your timeline. So when you had a week to report, perhaps now you have 2 days to report. And because you've got 2 days to report, you cannot, your review time to make sure things are okay is also reduced. Okay. You also have challenges around your efficient control environment, and I'll talk about this later. And connectivity, obviously, and access to power and other things, both at home, become a problem because you planned to have a generator at the office, but now you've got everybody at their home, and all of us don't have generators, so we can't work. So that creates a problem as well. And then means you can't close out on your financial reporting. I already talked about microeconomic environment changes and how you treat them and take them into your books, how they affect your transactions. You have supply chain disruptions, revenue changes, so you've got revenue contracts that either you can't deliver, so how do you account for those changes in the contracts? The clauses, some of the clauses, how do you then account for them given these abrupt changes? From a regulator point of view, the regulator still wants you to report in time. How do you deal with that? Your workers are off-site, but the regulator said, yeah, you still have 90 days to report as far as I'm concerned. you know. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with decline in revenue, cash flow, your capital, your solvency? So all those are things that the regulator now is thinking about, is worried about, and placing demands on you from a financial reporting perspective. If we look at the market, next slide, please. If we look at the markets, investors and people who invest in our businesses, the providers of capital, their demand on the entity in terms of reporting is also changing. And you'll have seen the questions are a little bit different, and if you look at the slide there that I have, the questions are 5, and you can group them into 3. They're focusing on resources, and the questions are around how much cash does the company have? I think we all agreed in a crisis like this, cash becomes king. Okay. What cash and liquidity could the company obtain? So can you extend your credit facilities? Can the bank give you extended loans, extended terms, cash flow? So resources, and particularly cash, is critical. Secondly, around the actions. And the 2 questions around there are what can the company do to manage expenditure? And you can see expenditure is aligned with managing cash flow in the short term. And what other actions can the company take to ensure viability? So investors are worried about their investment, they're worried about their return. And lastly, they're asking about the future. How is the company protecting its key assets and its value drivers? Okay, so you do not erosion of your investment. You're worried about erosion of your investment. And these are the questions, this is the information that investors are now asking of us as people who report to them, who report financial performance. And this is the type of information that is now being required to be put as disclosures in the financial reporting reports that we produce. Next slide. So that's a slide that talks to the disclosures I'm talking about. So we are moving from the left side, which is the traditional disclosures, current assets, current liabilities, subsequent events. They are more looking now at your corporate purpose. You know, how is the business realizing its purpose? Okay. How's the corporate governance? What type of engagement are you having with your shareholders? Okay. Next slide. From a reporting point of view, if we looked at 2019, we saw COVID, a lot of our reports related to subsequent events, and all of us said, look, didn't affect us. This thing happened in March, December, we were okay. So there's nothing to do, you know, it's a subsequent event. If you look at the guys who came in March, they couldn't hang on to the subsequent events because in March, that was part of their activity, okay? Those in June was even worse, and now they couldn't hang on to it, no. So there was a complete impact around there. So we saw from December a lot of subsequent events talking about COVID not having affected. As we progressed to half years, we were seeing a bit more disclosures around and impact of COVID in the presentations. If you look at the trading updates across, you're also seeing the impact of COVID in that. So from a financial reporting perspective then, next slide please, what is happening? Like I said, a lot of us have the thought that COVID is a backdoor out of complying with accounting standards, but in fact not. As far as we are concerned, you are expected to comply with all the accounting standards as they are required to. Okay, so there's no backdoor to say, okay, I will not comply with this because there was COVID. You cannot do that. Okay, so each standard will apply as it should, right? So I've put a list there of all the accounting standards, and these are not exhaustive, but these are the major standards. I think what is important to realize is in all this, some of the standards will be more pronounced because of COVID. Some of the matters will be more pronounced because of COVID than they used to be in the past. As an auditor, a frequent question that I get often when I ask a new question of a client is, you didn't ask this last year. Why are you asking it now? So this year, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are not auditors, we'll be asking a lot of questions that we didn't ask last year. Right? So around the standards, around the application of the standards. I'm going to look at 3 areas that I think are pertinent in terms of the standards. I'll not go, and I think I'm running out of time. Firstly, it's around subsequent events. I think I've talked about subsequent events and the fact that you need to consider these. And the question that I have there is, does the event, which is the coronavirus pandemic, provide evidence of a condition that existed at the end of the reporting period? So December 2020, okay, you're going to ask, was the pandemic there? Was an event there that existed at December 2020? If it was, you adjust. If it wasn't, it's a non-adjusting, and that's your decision tree that's there. Okay. So a lot of things that you need to consider, some of the things that you need to consider, for example, if you're in January or March and you get a credit downgrade in January, is that an adjusting? Do you go back to December and say the downgrade was as a result of conditions that existed in December 2020? So is that an adjusting or is that non-adjusting? So it can be very complex, and these are areas that you need to pay particular attention to. Next slide. The other area that is very critical is going concern. I mean, in the past, we've assumed the company will be there, it will exist, there's no worries. But regulators are now even more concerned about the ability of the company to continue as a going concern. So this is an area that you'll face. You need to do a bit more work around your assessments of the business. Is it a going concern or not? And remember, your going concern is always 12 months from the point of your audit report, from the point of the issue of the financial statement. So effectively, what you'll be looking at is your 12 months into 2021. Okay. What is happening there? What is the impact of COVID on the 12 months or the future of 2021? And bring it back here. What are the cash flows? And of course, that's uncertainty. Okay. So your auditors will be asking you those questions, say, where are these cash flows from? They'll be asking the very, very difficult questions. It is hard in an uncertain environment to, for example, to be firm on cash flows or to even be firm on financing facilities, because the banks are also reducing their exposures. Okay. The next one is on impairment of assets. Okay. Have you done an impairment test? Okay. And these are non-financial assets, by the way. Okay, so your PPE and your other intangibles that may be sitting on your balance sheet. And the impairment of an asset there is when an entity is not able to recover its carrying value, either by selling it or by using it. So selling it, fair value. Using it, your value in use. So you need to think about your impairment. What cash flows are you going to use? Right. Next. And in talking about impairments, there are 3 areas that you need to focus on and think about quite critically. Firstly, which assets are in scope for IAS 36, which is an impairment standard, because you need to know the assets, because in the standard, there are certain types of assets that have a different requirements in terms of your impairment testing. And then secondly, what is your unit of account for impairment testing? Now, when I talk about unit of account, are you going to do a CGU or a cash generating unit, or are you going to look at it at the asset level? Okay. It seems pretty obvious, but these have very, very different impacts and very, very different results. So you need to be clear on what the unit of account is when you're testing. Okay. And then also you need to think about when does IAS 36 require an impairment test? So there are certain assets that require annual tests. There are certain assets that you test when you have indicators of impairment. I'm being chased. Okay. Let me just quickly talk about expected credit losses, and then I'll go to the last slide. In terms of expected credit losses, the ECL, IFRS 9, we are talking about how has COVID impacted the estimate of expected credit losses. And I think this has been big, and a lot of us in accounting, we've been talking about this thing called the significant change in the estimated default risk, in credit risk, SICA, okay? And that's the one that determines whether you move from stage 1 to stage 2 in terms of your provisioning. So you need to think about that. We do know the ISB issued, next slide. Yes, ISB issued a communication very early in the year around that, and I think what they told us was, please use your judgment around some of these things. Use your judgment. So in using your judgment, I would encourage you to please connect with the auditors, connect with your accounting advisors early enough to understand the wider implications of that. I've run out of time, but I want to leave you perhaps with just the slide, I think slide 23. Okay, so COVID has not spared us, your auditors. In terms, 23, the slide before. Yeah. COVID has not spared us, your auditors. Like I said, regulators are expecting us to have more robust discussions around the financial reporting and around going concern, for example, impairment. So I would encourage you again to have early discussions with your auditors to understand what is changing, to understand the expectations, and to understand additional information that they'll be looking for. In terms of the audit implications, next slide, there are 4 questions there that you probably need to think about. Clients should help auditors understand how the business has been impacted by COVID. I think a lot of discussion, we say, no, we are okay. But remember, you can have impact arising out of your parent. For example, if your parent supports you financially, is your parent able to continue to support you? Your supply chains as well. So there are wider implications there than just, look, the economy, we don't have lockdown, so we are okay. I think the discussions go beyond that. Secondly, around more conversations, like I said, with the auditors. That we need to do a bit more work. Maybe the fee needs to go up this year. Yes? Yes, fees need to go up. Thirdly is around the audit strategy. We have to change. And remember now, some of us, we're working offline. The processes also may change. The risk profile is also increasing because of the control environment. And lastly, consider the actions of the board and directors. My last slide is just around your conversation starters with COVID. You want to think about some of these 4 questions around your people and the society. That should be your first point in terms of how you respond to COVID. Secondly, around your business continuity. So now you need to think about what happens if all my staff are sick. How do I continue business? Thirdly, around your financial viability. People will not pay on time. You need cash flow. You've got contracts. And lastly is your situation management. So how are you managing the situation? Thank you very much.
Another good round of applause for Mr. Mark Lakeni for the presentation. It appears, Mr. Lakeni, that whereas there are some waivers, I think, coming from the Zambia Revenue Authority arising from the COVID, there are no waivers on the application of the international reporting, financial reporting standards. So let us just do the right things always. An announcement coming from the electoral committee. I should have said this earlier, but I didn't want to disrupt the proceedings. This is to all associates and fellow members of the Institute. You are reminded to carry a smart device for voting on Saturday, 17th October 2020 during the AGM elections. You are reminded to carry a smart device for voting on Saturday, which is tomorrow. That is one. Two, you will be required to have a working Gmail account to participate in the voting. You will be required to have a working Gmail account to participate in the voting. Secretariat, the ICT department or unit at the Secretariat will be on hand to assist you open a Gmail account if you do not have one yet. So anyone who is voting tomorrow, you need to have a voting device, but also you need to ensure that you have a Gmail account. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to get into the question and answer session. I'll ask Secretary to bring 2 chairs, I think, for our speakers. 2 chairs for our speakers, as I humbly invite Mr. Nube and Mr. Libakeni to take their seats in front as they prepare to answer questions. We also have members following us via Zoom. As you know, we needed to innovate. Some members are watching from they're following from their rooms right now. Those that are watching us and following these proceedings via Zoom, you are requested, if you have any questions, to submit your questions via the chat app in the Zoom application, in the Zoom platform. So there's why you can send your questions on chat when you're watching us through Zoom. Okay, so this is how we are going to proceed. We're going to take a set of 3 questions at a time before we can invite the speakers to respond. Who have got the mics? There's one mic there, another mic there, another mic there. Already I'm seeing hands. This mic, please, as you ask a question, introduce yourself briefly. I think at this stage I'm the only one who's supposed to give the title of my title. You can just introduce your name and then we can take the question.
Morning. Thank you very much, Vixon, for a good presentation. My name is Jeti Lungu. I like your 3 pillars. I could relate with them. I just wanted you to expand on value leadership. I think you're a bit in a hurry, and I didn't really understand or get your articulation of value leadership.
Second question. Here, there's a hand here. Another? Okay. Mr. President has got a question also. So we start with, okay, one there.
Good morning. My name is Susiku Nasinda from the Rural Electrification Authority. My question goes to Vixon. You talked about thinking in the now, encourage individuals and organizations to think in the now. My question to you is, how can organizations achieve this at organization-wide level? How do we encourage modern thinking across organizations? Thank you.
Mr. President, and then I will allow the lady to ask the first question.
Okay, there's one slide I was hoping you was going to cover, the one on fraud risks from COVID. I think it's an important topic. So if you could just cover that, what sort of fraud risk we expect as a result of COVID-19. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Eunice Nyalazi Piri, and my question is on managing disruption through innovation and adaptation. Thank you very much for your presentation. I might say it was very insightful. And in your presentation, you mentioned the fact that as accountants, we need to stop doing things differently and stop doing things different. But I would like to look at the company-wide. What practical steps should an organization take in order to foster innovation in order to be able to adapt easily in the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. The first person asked what are the issue of value leadership. Value leadership means that you emphasize on the welfare of society, the positive impact of the disruption on society, rather than being internally focused. Then you are doing value leadership. In other words, you're looking at how we make everything better. Is that correct? Did you, the one, I couldn't see the person who was asking. Are you getting you've got it now? Yes. So in other words, instead of thinking how you can buy a Mercedes, think about how your grandmother also can have a better house in the village. Just a quick joke. Someone asked a question. What was the question again? I'll get to the one also. Company. How do we managing the now? How do we manage the now? Now this is a very interesting thing because we want to manage the now. It will be very difficult to have blueprints of how to manage the now. We've got all to think on our feet. Take for example, when COVID came, how do we manage the COVID? There were no blueprints, no medical books, no management books had anything on how to manage a crisis of that magnitude. So in other words, we got to have this mindset of being able to adapt and move as soon as the situation rises. I can never even give you the how. It's like someone is sinking and you say, let me look for a manual on how to rescue a person who is sinking in a river. By the time you get the manual, the person may be dead. Yes, the next one was organization-wide. That is where leadership comes in. Remember, the tone at the top sets the whole culture of the organization. Now, if we people in leadership, and I want to believe all of you are in leadership in one form or the other, and leadership, by the way, is not always being the CEO, but we people in leadership, if we strive for initiative and innovation, we always want people to do things they were in the laid down procedure. There will never be no one will ever be able to deal with innovation. So we got to be able to move away from this culture. Remember what I said? I said, from the culture of insisting on people getting permission first in an emergency, let them take the decision and apologize later. They are very difficult concepts. We must reward success, but we must also make provision for failure, because in the current situation, not everything we do succeed. It will be trial and error because we're in a crisis. So the leadership in the organization must start inculcating that thing into their people. Say, please come up with ideas that can help us. And when the ideas come, don't say, no, not like that. In fact, I read a book that says when you go for a strategy retreat, you must have the pros and cons list. There should never be pros and cons. One list, you give your idea. If it's not in that line, give it on the other board. Say, my idea belongs to this one. But never say, this one's the wrong idea. The moment you do that, some people who are very timid but very intelligent will just go back to their shell. So you need to have a culture that permits people to think in the whole organization.
President, thank you for that question. I think it's an important area. I skipped it because I had several slides there, and I think Ms. Jambo here was chasing me to conclude. Fraud is extremely critical in this time of COVID, particularly that for a lot of us, we're being asked to either rotate, so 1 week we're in the office, the other week we're not, or completely stay at home. And you agree with me that most of our controls, our processes, were never designed for remote working. They were never designed to have one, today you're in the office, tomorrow you're not. Rather, they were designed with everybody around. If paper is passing, it will go from point A to point B to point C to point D. Now you're finding, for example, the guy who's supposed to sign is not in the office that day, but it needs to be authorized. You're finding authorizations now are now via email. So that creates opportunity for fraud in the organization. Those of you who remember the fraud triangle, I'm sure most of you accountants know about it. We talk about opportunity. What is the opportunity to create fraud? The justification or realization. And then lastly, the pressure. I mean pressure, every day you hear, ninkwataka pressure. Yeah? In these circumstances, pressure is very heightened now. So when you start seeing opportunities, I mean, we don't all start out as fraudsters, but sometimes the opportunity is great because you've seen that actually you can get money out of a business without a signature. An email suffices, so you create an email. You know that you need to present good results, otherwise you lose your job. So you forge, you forge your numbers. Individually, you've heard that the business is closing, you're upset. You've given 50 years to the business and they kick you out just like that. I'll get out my pension, so you decide to defraud the business. So in these times, fraud is extremely heightened, and you will see a lot of work that is done around that. Aligned to fraud, obviously, is a heightened risk also of cybersecurity. Like Mr. Nguwe has said, thieves are always on the watch. They're very enlightened, and they're always looking for opportunity. So fraud is very, very high risk at this moment. Thank you.
As we get the next set, it is not, or rather fraud is not part of the things to consider when Mr. Nguwe says better to ask for forgiveness afterwards and wait for permission. So that does not cover getting other people's or the business's money. More questions, please? Okay, we've got a hand there. Okay, I've got a Commissioner Mayenga here. Okay, so let Madam Mayenga start and then we can come that side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think my question goes to Libakeni. Managing in a crisis. Managing in a crisis. One of the issues that we have noticed, which came out in the presentation, managing in a crisis, and you talked about managing your expenditure. One thing that we have noticed, mind you, it's the humble tax collector, but very vicious when it comes to collecting. So, what we have noticed as a collecting agency is that the only thing that you accountants know how to manage is to delay taxes. I don't know how many letters that we receive on a daily basis with my colleagues here asking to say, you don't have resources to pay taxes. Are you telling me that when it comes to managing expenditure, the only expenditure that you think can be managed properly is to delay the taxes? And some of that taxes is not even your money, because the tax that you collect on behalf of ZRA or the pay as you earn that you actually deducted from the employees. So, are you being compliant as accountants to delay paying taxes, which will affect other economic fundamentals? That is my question. Is only managing taxes in terms of your cash flow? Thank you.
The gentleman there.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. My question goes to
the mic, please. Use the mic.
Yeah. Is it audible?
The speakers can't hear you.
Hello. Is it okay now? Hello.
Okay,
Hello?
put it close to
Hello?
your mouth.
Hello?
Okay, thank you.
Good. This one goes to Mr. Vic. We've heard about the issue of mindset change from time in, time out, and I'm hearing it even in future. Can you elaborate more on how we can achieve that, the mindset issue? Then when you brought the topic on design thinking and integrative thinking, what came to my mind immediately was, is this the cure? Change.
Okay, I think we're having difficulties with that mic. Secretary, please, can you assist?
Hello? Yeah. When you brought the topic on design thinking and integrative thinking, immediately what came to my mind was, is this the cure for mindset change? And when you talk about mindset change, if this is the cure, the two topics, what scale are you referring to? Is it nationwide, or is it just to the few who are educated when it comes to mindset change? Then just see a proposal. This one goes to Mr. Mark again. You brought a topic on innovation. Now, my thinking was, we have young men and women in our family as Zika who are very innovative. But my proposal is that, can those innovative ideas, can they be sometimes one or two presented to our members like it is now, where people come up with innovative ideas and Zika to encourage them, or in future to create a fund that can support innovative ideas, because some people have ideas but they have no means of translating those ideas into reality, so they end up just like that. So
right.
innovation can be supported.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This side, Mr. President Chintu Mulendema, please.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to thank the speakers for having delivered their messages very clearly. I just want to say, Vixon Nyube, welcome back to Zambia. I want to make a comment on the topic that has been presented by Mr. Ngove. My experience, there are about 5 pillars in managing disruption. And we did that when I was Vice Chairman Zanaco, when we took over after privatization. One is leadership. Do we have the right leader in the right job? 2, the structure of reporting. How is it? Is it cohesive? 3, do we have the right people in the right jobs to support the Zaganot, the leader? You need to have people who are thinking. 4, you need systems to look ahead, the strategic thinking. 5, you need managing change. Managing change together with the working culture. Those are the principles. You will manage disruption, whatever you do. And that is my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Mulendema. And since yours is not a question, but rather a comment, I'll take another question. Council.
I wanted to find out, you as auditors look at when you're talking about going concern in relation to the COVID, what sort of material uncertainties, what things would you consider when you're looking at material uncertainty and significant doubt about the ability of a business to continue as a going concern? There are issues around, for example, if you've got a loan that's denominated in foreign currency, you obviously exchange difference, the kwacha. Is that something that would then say, oh, as a result of this, we actually have concerns about this business's ability to continue?
Thank you, Councillor Kalaluka. In fact, as the speakers are preparing to take those questions, I've got two questions that are coming via the Zoom platform. There's one question coming from Christabel, who says, comment for Mark. Organizations and businesses have suffered huge financial impact because of COVID. Granted, there will be extra work to do, but the auditors should also be mindful not to increase the burden further, even if work will increase. Since we all have to take a knock, sorry for typos, gadget issues. I'm sure I've gotten the point, Mr. Then another one has come from Tybel Mulando of ERB, and he says, to everyone, in terms of reporting, EY, how should companies deal with already locked contracts in foreign currency in the midst of COVID-19 impact and unfavorable exchange rate against lower than anticipated revenue due to the above two factors? Mr. Mark, you can start, and then Mr. you can. Thank you.
The first question on delaying payment of taxes from Mrs. Miyanga. I think that's a hospital pass to me. Damned if I say anything and damned if I don't. I think it's probably beyond my pay grades to answer that, but I would hope that in your managing your cash flows, obviously, your statutory obligations are an important part of your operations. And you make sure as a business that you comply with the statutory obligations. So I would hope when you're managing your cash flows, managing your taxes and paying your taxes is one of your key focus areas. In terms of going concern, like I said, going concern is quite specific to you as an entity and perhaps as an industry. I don't think I can give you an exact answer here in terms of what exactly it is. It's by circumstance, it's by judgment in terms of the entity. You could have an entity where the loan, for example, you mentioned is significant, it's got very heavy terms, and any breach around that could affect the continuing business. I think you've seen businesses who have been closed down because of a loan. So creditors, liquidation, and so on and so forth. So you need to assess the impact of that. So you would look at your indicators, what we call indicators of going concern, and then you need to make a judgment in terms of your own assessment. You as a business person know your business better, so you'll be able to evaluate what you think is going to why you think you're still a going concern, and in discussions with your auditor will either concur with you, or the auditor will say, look, you've got an uncertainty, and you need to show me that you've put in measures to mitigate this uncertainty. The worst form, obviously, is a qualification around your financial statement because of going concern, but often you find you have mitigations, and those mitigations are taken into account. Christabel, I take note of the audit fees that will be increasing your expenditure, but it's like lawyers. When lawyers increase their fees, I'm sure you don't argue so much. So we're taking a leaf from there as auditors. In terms of the exchange rate, like I said, there are no back doors to the auditing standards, so you would follow the requirements. If I understood well, you're talking about exchange rate and convergence. That's, I think, IS 21, I think, if my memory serves me right. you would follow the requirements there and obviously the requirements around that borrowing. So there are no backdoors purely because it's COVID. Thank you.
May I also take time to acknowledge Dr. Chintu Mulendema's presence. Thank you very much for still being part of Zika. I'm sure I'll see you outside. You don't know what I mean? Oh, because former presidents tend to disappear sometimes, and you are still part of Zika. Right. Now, mindset. Mindset has got to do with how you see things using certain lenses that mainly may have been polluted your views from childhood. A child who was brought up by a very cruel father thinks men are very bad people. And vice versa. If the mother was cruel, he thinks women are cruel. Now, when we're talking about mindset in this particular thing is that don't focus too much on the crisis or the problem, but find ways of finding solutions in the crisis. A good example is someone once told me, two gentlemen were taking a walk in a bush, and then suddenly a lion appeared. Okay? The lion didn't kill both of them. None of them was killed. But they saw a lion and went back home. One of them says, I am going to set up a tourism spot on this place because there are lions and tourists who come and see them. Another one said, I'll never step in this place because there are lions. That's a mindset. You see the opportunity in the threat and not the danger in the threat. Then you have a proper mindset. So even in this disruption time, let us be looking for how we can use this disruption for the benefit of ourselves.
Thank you so much, our esteemed speakers. I think we are running out of time. I'm sure we can end here. If there are no burning questions, I'd like to say thank you so much to the speakers. I was asking Mr. Newell earlier on, I said, why don't you begin to impart this knowledge in the younger generation? And he said, look, I'm coming back home, and this is what I'll be doing. And as Bridging Up Solutions, we'll look forward to partnering with him and see how best we can work on helping the younger generation. Thank you. In closing this session, I would like to repeat the announcements that associates and fellow members of the Institute, you are reminded to carry a smart device for voting tomorrow. Please don't forget that. And in addition, you will also be required to have a working Gmail account. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for our speakers, Mr. Nyewe and Mr. Liwakeni. And indeed, a huge round of applause for your moderator, Julius Ziambo. Much as President Jason Kazilimani had earlier indicated, this could be his last time officially opening our pre-AGM workshop. You may wish to know I'm still around. So get used to me. I'm still around. We'll see you again next year. Thank you so much and have a blessed day until we meet tomorrow. Thank you.